Alright guys, it's time to get serious. I just watched this movie on Shudder called The Dead Thing. Absolute dud. Only thing that died during this movie was all of my brain cells. Now I'm dead inside. Because whatever these movies are that are coming out that are just purposely vague and abstract, there's just no plot to these. It's fill in the blank. It's do your homework, do the director's work, do the writer's work. Like, these movies are becoming oddly frustrating to me because I looked up the description of this film. I watched the trailer. The trailer caught my attention enough. If you follow my channel, I don't usually watch trailers. This one actually pulled me in a bit. This is obviously a very low budget kind of art house type of horror film. So I was like, I'm going to check it out. I heard a couple of big YouTubers talking about it. And as always, it feels like I'm just going against the grain, the great contrarian. I'm the only person who ever highlights some of these asinine movies a lot of people seem to love. I heard a bunch of positive buzz about this, so I checked it out on Shudder, and it's absolute garbage. And I'm going to start off by saying how this movie is described on IMDb and then what it actually is to highlight why this is becoming so frustrating to me. So the movie is described as a young woman is lost in a series of meaningless connections who falls in love with a charismatic and sensitive man who hides a dark secret that turns her affair into a dangerous obsession. Now, when you pair that with a compelling trailer, or you like to support low-budget movies, that sounds like an interesting plot for a thriller. What the movie is actually about is it follows a single young woman named Alex, and just to put it lightly, she's promiscuous. She gets around, hooks up with a lot of different dudes. It's okay, we're all adults, you can do whatever you want, that's not a problem, but she's consistently on this online dating app called Friction, where she goes out and it feels like every single day is the same to her. She goes to work, gets off work, goes on a date with one of these guys, sleeps with them, never talks to him again. And after what feels like 100 different dates, she eventually meets this guy named Kyle. They kick it off. They go right back to her place. They barely even converse. They hook up. They have a great night. There's some awesome connection between the two. They spend all night together, and then he just ghosts her in the morning. It's as if they never met. She can't find any trace of this guy. He's very mysterious. It's almost like he doesn't exist. She tracks him down at his place of work. She asks his coworkers and finds out this guy actually died a week ago. And up until that point, I was actually into this plot, like a lot of these weird, abstract, vague horror movies. I wanted to know what was going on. Who is this guy? Why is she looking into him? Like, what does this all mean? I was compelled. But this movie, like so many films I seemingly rant about and I'm the big contrarian on, just has no purpose for existing when you do get the explanations they give. Clearly a low budget film, as I said. I think it looks great. I actually really like the score of this. They use the same little like melody plenty of times throughout the movie. But what it inevitably ends up doing is just choosing the most lazy, derivative, vague, ambiguous path you can possibly imagine, where the director just wants you to fill in all of the blanks and all of the writing to this movie because you get no answers for anything. And there are some people who love to do that. I think they love homework project movies where they can constantly talk, research. I'm starting to get sick of it, and it just feels very lazy and played out at this point. It's like a trope. I'm a sucker for this thing called continuity, cohesiveness to a story where I at least have something to go off of. This movie's setup intriguing enough. Where it ends up going, it feels like they just started saying, oh, we're just doing shit. A hodgepodge of psychedelic images, plenty of sex scenes, some vague conversations that lead nowhere, all in the guise of being art house and mysterious, but you stop caring very early on, so the whole thing feels very boring. And as I always say, that's the biggest crime a movie can commit. I'd rather hate a movie than be bored by it. This movie bored me to tears in the second half. But the longer you spend time with these characters, the less you care about them, the more flat the acting is, the more vague the writing is, and the more this whole thing just feels like a waste of 90 minutes. So as I said, she's going on dates, she's meeting these men, and then eventually she meets this guy named Kyle. She goes back, they hook up, and then he just goes poof, he's gone. And even going off of that, it's like this movie wants to be 5 different movies in one. Some Lovely Bones, some Ghosts with Patrick Swayze, it's just all over the place. She somehow starts stalking this guy who apparently doesn't even exist, but he has a physical form that can date other women, so there's that element to it. And then you get no explanation of who this guy actually is, how he died, why he died. One of these movies that's so purposely vague, I think you can interpret like 15 different metaphors for this. I mean, the movie can be a metaphor for depression, trauma, the monotony of everyday life, how it just keeps playing out, and this guy was the only thing that stood out. It could be a metaphor for current dating landscape, how it's just a ghost culture, and he's a literal ghost. The pathetic thing is I can't actually tell you what I think this movie was. I only have my interpretation. I think it's going the depression route, but I have absolutely no idea what this movie was trying to say. I just know what I took from it because it's so purposely vague. And then as this movie progresses, it just changes itself about 3 different times to the point you're like 10 layers deep in randomness that makes no sense. As I said, there's way too many psychedelic images. The acting becomes flat. You have this weird secondary story going on with her roommate and her coworker at work, but the whole thing just feels so scattered, like there's no continuity to any of it. This movie has probably the most sex scenes in a movie I've seen in years. Out of like a 90-minute movie, no joke, I think this movie has like 28 to 30 minutes of sex. As weird as it feels to say, it wasn't even choreographed well. It just felt like these people were seizing out on screen. And then as the movie continues to go, Alex starts becoming a hermit because she spends all of her time with this guy who doesn't exist, but he kind of exists. And every 15 minutes or so that they can market this as a horror movie and put it on Shudder and put the scenes in the trailer, this guy goes on to like kill somebody close to her, but there's really no explanation for why he's doing it. Again, in my opinion, it's a giant metaphor for her like breaking friendships and cutting herself off and the distancing and the grief and the trauma, but I don't care enough to confirm that. And if you've made it to this point, I'm sure you're thinking he's not even talking about the movie, he's just ranting, but there is really no substance to this movie. It's just an assortment of random scenes marketed as a horror movie. The newest continuation in the trend of art house horror films that has no real purpose, and it just makes you solve the mystery of everything that's going on, all of the interpretations, all of the central messaging. I really only wanted to review this movie in case you guys ever stumble across this movie, you stumble across some of the bigger channels who have been reviewing it, and you ponder to yourself, should I watch that movie? I want to give you a concrete answer. No, don't watch this movie. It's absolute dog shit. If I have to be the one to fall on the sword for this one, call me a martyr. Just don't waste your time. And as always, if you haven't subscribed, join me down below. I love talking movies with you. I will see you in the next video. Peace.